All right. I am going to press record on this right now so that we could have this viewed for you guys later. So if you do want more information later, you could watch this. We're going to send you a link as soon as this is done. So just check your email. So that's one thing. So you'll find that this will be up on YouTube for you to watch at your leisure. So if you want your partner to see this, just know it's going to be there. Dan, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Dan,
I think this is the third one now.
The third, yeah, but you can't go anywhere, so don't think that this is it for you. Yeah, that would be horrendous. Guys, I'm going to put Dan's information on the screen right now. Oh, that was his name I just took off. Here's his information so you could write it down now, but I will put it back on at the end. But Dan, do you remember the first time that we met? Do you literally, like, no joke, do you literally remember the first time that we met?
I remember it was that fair for like
I've got butter chicken.
I had a little booth.
Butter
He
chicken.
came up and said, "We got to talk."
It's so good.
Yes, it's too funny. Hold on, I'm going to mute some of my participants. There we go. But yes, you were in that first row, and I remember my twinnies were little, and there was a lot of things that I needed to do that I didn't get done yet. So the kids were already a little bit big, and I felt that I was a little bit behind the 8 ball. I knew that I was already a good mom. I knew that I was doing my best. I did not develop the best financial habits in college when I got my first Wells Fargo credit card with probably a 90% interest rate, the first one that you get like when they're soliciting people in college. I remember I may have racked up a lot of debt, and I never really thought about saving. Truthfully, I really never thought about it. Like, I don't come from a family that has, tons of money in the bank. We definitely lived paycheck to paycheck for my entire childhood. And now with my own kids, I didn't want that same struggle, and I didn't want my kids to know. Although truthfully, I will say, like, I did not know that we were struggling when I was young. I think that my parents were really good at that, but I didn't even want my kids to worry about it. So yeah, so we met Dan, and as they say, the rest is history. Dan, typically what do you do when you help him? Before we jump into our points, like, how do you typically work with our Twiniversity families?
Yeah, well, to give some context, that was, I think, 15 years ago.
It was.
Which dates us a little bit.
Yeah,
but,
teeny bit.
It was the start of a long relationship between us and Twiniversity. But I've been working with expectant parents of twins for that whole time and speaking at your classes. And some of the best clients I've gotten have come from it. Some really great friends have come from it. Certainly not the only people I work with, but I like it because it's an overwhelming time. And it's a time where I know what I do can bring some peace and some confidence in what you're doing. I think when you get a little bit older, you get some gray hair, you start to think about, like, what's my purpose? What am I really doing here? And, I think that a lot of this is helping people through a crazy time. You're having twins, your world is going to change, and I can be the voice of, it's going to be okay, here's what you got to do. Simple, one step at a time, and build that relationship with people.
It's so funny because I think that you and I, although we've been working professionally together, but personally, I think that the term is trauma bonded. I think that's what it is. So for those of you out there, Dan and I have been through some very bumpy situations with Twiniversity families, and there's not many people in our Twiniversity circle that, number one, I trust as much as Dan. That goes without saying. But there's not as many people that really have gone above and beyond in our Twiniversity circle, and Dan is one of them. So although Dan is not an official member of our Twiniversity team, he certainly is usually somebody that I'm like, guys, you gotta talk to Dan. So I want to kind of get into the why you talk to Dan. So I built up some points for you. And so for those of you that are watching, I am literally popping these at Dan. So I put these together for us, and we're going to use him. Whether he likes it or not, it's too bad, but we need him. We need his information, and this is what we're going to do. So today, I really want to talk about, obviously, budgeting. I want to talk about whether you are pregnant or whether your twinnies are here or bigger. So right now, for me in the chat, could you guys do me a favor, and could you put if you're expecting or how old your twinnies are? And so then I'll take a look and I'll kind of make a little compilation of what we have there. And then I'll give Dan kind of some insight. So during the presentation, he could customize it a little bit for everybody. So if we see we're very heavy in the expectant world, we'll try to talk more about that pre-savings almost. And then if your kids are already in middle school, we got a little bit of catching up to do. Okay, so Dan, I'm gonna get you that, so sit tight, because I know you can't see the comments. So guys, you could also talk crap about Dan. He can't see any of the comments in Zoom. I like it that way. It's much more fun to me. All right, so the first thing I do want to talk about, okay, so my first point of the day is, how do you create a budget? And I want to talk about that need versus want. So does everybody usually create a budget? Because I find on my end, when I'm working with expectant families especially, nobody ever, even if I say, have you guys talked, about finances? And they're like, oh, well, we know we got to buy a new car because we can't fit 3 across if they have a +1 already. But do you find that in general, people think like very suspiciously of the B word, as we'll call it?
Yeah, it can be a scary word, a budget, for sure. And do I find most people do it? No, I don't think I did it when I was that age, when I was younger. So I get it. And finance in general is very behavioral, and savings and budgeting is very, very behavioral.
Yeah.
And, like a case in point, in doing this a while, there are many, many people that I work with that after a while, you see their biggest asset is their 401k. And why is that? It's because when you sign up to work, you check the box to have a 401k, and it just automatically goes in out of your paycheck and goes into this 401k. So what happens is you live on what's left over, but you are not consciously saving about anything else, and that's happening unconsciously. So human behavior is essentially like we get our money, we spend money on our lives, and whatever's left over, maybe we try and save it if we can. There isn't really discipline, there isn't really a consciousness around it.
Yeah.
So I think like a lot of the way I work with my clients is the key here is just creating consciousness around it. And that may be creating a budget and creating an awareness. And there's a lot of ways to do that. There's a lot of software. You can do living expense worksheets.
Yeah.
You could take, there's only 2 ways to pay for things. It's a credit card or it's a cash card, right?
Yeah.
So bank statements and credit cards will tell you everything about your spending habits, and can give you a pretty good sense of what you're spending, what your burn rate is. Now,
my burn rate? That sounds dramatic and like a Liam Neeson movie. The heck is my burn rate, Dan?
You told me not to get too financial.
Yeah, I did. Well, what just happened there?
Yes, your expense rate. But, look, also like a lot, I think this will maybe feed into some other points, but when you're having twins, when you're having a baby, let alone twins, there are certainly a lot of expenses, one-off expenses that are going to they're just part of it that you have to account for. But you get through it, right? You pay for that, but then, you have to get into a rhythm of cash flow, of what these expenses are, creating consciousness around it. And like, look, the key to this is to not just save, but not go into debt.
Yeah.
When you don't pay attention to this, debt can be crippling, and it can get bigger, and it can compound. So, the rules of finance are really the same for everyone. It doesn't matter if you have twins, you're expecting twins, if you have single, if you don't have kids. The rule is that you live a budgeted lifestyle of what you can afford, and everything else gets saved. And a lot of the way I work with my clients is really you save first, we create unconscious saving, and what's left over is our lifestyle, is what we're allowed to spend.
Listen, I did not believe that was a thing. The first time that I ever met Dan and he told me about this, like, secret, I call it secret savings because I'm not a finance bro and I don't have a burn rate, or I don't know what other words he's going to use, but I'd kind of like to make fun of him about it. But I really did not think that we could save anything. But I want to talk about, we do have a lot of expecting families. Okay, so the majority of the people that are on with us are currently expecting. So I do want to talk about, kind of come back to the center of the camera for me, please. I will literally give you on camera. And for the record, guys, Dan and I are really friends. So when you see that I am saying things to him like, come closer. It's only because I love him so much. And I want him to be the best him instead of the sweatered vest that they're making fun of on Saturday Night Live this week. I think they did. They were making fun of Finance Bros. But when you're creating a budget, right, for your babies, you do have to think about the need versus want. Yes, you may want that hand-carved Moroccan crib, and, you know, two of them is probably going to break the budget. So I want you guys everybody that's expecting, I want you to sit down with your partner, and I want you to figure out what your budget is by knowing what your expenses are. So Dan already talked about that, and he said that the only way that we spend money is through a bank card, right, or cash, let's say, and you could see when that's coming out of the ATM, or a credit card. I'm going to say this is not a finance thing, but one of the best things that we have ever done is use one credit card. One credit card. I remember that before I met Dan, I had an Amex, and then I don't even remember what I had, to be honest with you, but I remember that Dan basically said, if we don't have our money working for us, not that we're dummies, but he said it in a much nicer way, and our money wasn't working for us. Like we were doing things and spending unnecessary money. And one of the things that I was having trouble with was kind of keeping everything in order. Right? Because when you have credit cards, that means if you have multiple credit cards, that means you have multiple payments that have to get done. And when you have new 20s, you're going to be lucky if the power doesn't go off, not because you don't have the money, but because you remember to pay the bill. So simplify is going to be one of the biggest things that we could give you. And so thinking about that need versus want. Do you need 15 credit cards? Do you need 15 different bank accounts? Do you need, like, what can you simplify? Because there's going to be so much chaos in your universe with two newborn infants or two 3-year-old infants, because I know Patsy's here, so I'm talking to you too. But I know that with all the question marks and unpredictability of the life that's ahead of you, the more that we could focus and make it easier, the better. So the first thing you do is really figure out what you need. Do you need to have dinner out 15 times a week? If you need it, you need it. Dan and I are never going to question what you think you need. But do you just want it? Like, are there other ways that you could save? And this, of course, is getting down to like a very specific line item. But it's really good, like Dan was saying, to create good habits now. And so creating kind of that initial baby budget, like you need diapers, right? But then I'm not going to say this is for everybody, but you know that you could save up to like $6,000 in the life of your children if you cloth diaper. Now, you may not want to do that because it could be a little grossy town. However, there are ways that you can save. Now, of course, Dan's not going to know those ways, but in all sincerity, you know a lot. By working with 27 bazillion Twiniversity families, you've known where people have kind of cut corners so that it didn't sacrifice their lifestyle or daily, operations of the universe. So when you have a family that's expecting, what's one of the very first things that you tell them to do after they have kind of like, we know how much we're spending? And no, we cannot save, $20 a week. That's going to be impossible. How do you convince people that they can? Or do you look through the line items with them and say, okay, Nat, like, do you really need to spend this much money on yarn? I know you have ADHD and you love crocheting and start a new hobby every 15 seconds, but your Michael's bills, they're adding up. So how specifically do you go with clients to really make sure that you're doing what's best for them, not like a generic overall, you're expecting, here's 5 things to do?
Yeah, well, I find that like the budget that you create, people are pretty good with it. There's certainly variations that come along that kind of can mess people up. Certainly when you're having kids, the big ticket items are childcare, right? And how that factors in. I mean, look, I think that we do spend time in understanding people's budgets, but again, like the approach that I typically take is to create some discipline around saving first, right? So like we do, and I would encourage everyone to do this, like open up a bank account and just set up a systematic amount to be saved every month. maybe it's $100, $500, $1,000, whatever you can do to separate that from your world, to just make sure that that forced savings is happening.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to force you to live a little bit more of a budgeted lifestyle,
Yeah.
right? Because you can live in a budgeted lifestyle, but if there's a good amount sitting in cash and, the tickets to that show are coming around, or like you want to do that vacation, well, we got that money sitting in cash. Let's go. Those are where bad habits occur.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like creating a system to automatically save in liquid places, right? That's something else. It is a good step. And look, there are other programs and systems that I work with my clients on where we create unconscious saving. You're not even saving, where we sort of have people's checks, their employer check, get direct deposited into an account automatically. And then we send them money of what we think we need every month directly to them. And what happens is whatever is not being spent will automatically get saved.
Yeah.
And
So smart.
your paychecks tend to get bigger at the end of the year than they are at the beginning of the year, but you're living the same life. So there's a lot of unconscious savings that comes from that. But it really starts with consciousness and having discipline and working with somebody who can help you with it.
Amen. All right, mister, I'm going to our point number 2. So we're going to talk about how baby registries are your friend. Now, Dan, you have only 2 kids that weren't born on the same day. But
Secrets out.
2 nonetheless. So the thing is where Dan won is because he just had to buy 1 crib and he got to use it twice. Right? Our problem is that we need many things of 2 different versions of it, right? Or 2 different pieces of it, like 2 cribs, 2 mattresses, 2 car seats. We can't have hand-me-downs. So when creating registries, the biggest tip that I will definitely give you, and I will happily take this one, is start by seeing what you could get secondhand first. Now, if you guys have not taken a Twiniversity class, we're going to put in a special discount code for you guys, because now that we know that you want a budget, we're going to help you save some money. So the money that you save on your Twiniversity class, by the way, you should put away in your secret savings. Just an idea. Okay. But when creating your baby registry, see exactly what you could get done first, what we could get used. So the things that you really need to buy new are cribs, mattresses, and car seats. Those are the 3 big things that should always be purchased new, ideally. None of them are going to break the bank. You could go very low budget on any of them or all of them. However, once you know exactly what you could get secondhand, that's when you should start developing your twin baby registry. And yes, I do know everybody wants everything new, right? We all want everything new. However, if we want a stroller, let's say that the stroller we want is $900. If you just have like a $900 stroller, but you still need 8 million other things, people are going to buy the smaller ticket items. It's not like the office is going to get together and be like, let's all chip in $20 and let's go buy that stroller for her or for him, right? They may say, oh, look, they registered for 15 things that are $20, which, by the way, you could have got secondhand from your sister, from your coworkers, from everybody. So figure out what you could get secondhand first, and then develop your baby registry. So for those of you that are out there right now, how many of you have already created your baby registry? I do know that we have quite a few people in here today and a lot that are expecting, but it's really, I do love, it's really varied, Dan. Like it goes from 23 weeks pregnant to babies that are years old. So we have everybody here, which is really, really nice. And I do want to apologize that you couldn't hear Dan well before. Dan, I fixed it. Your mic, you could have gotten closer, but whatever. I didn't criticize you enough, but I did fix it on my end.
You have to tell me out here.
I know, but now I got it. So now you don't have to worry about it. But creating that baby registry, I want to know who created their baby registries after they did an inventory of the items that they had already in their house. Right? Because a lot of us immediately, like we find out we're pregnant, we start researching, strollers, we start researching breastfeeding supplies, we start doing all this homework, and we want to have new. However, think about this. Babies only use stuff for, I don't know, about 15 minutes. So how worn out is that onesie going to get? It's not like my favorite pair of jeans that I probably have for 7 years now. Right? Like we could continue wearing things. We don't change much. But from babies to go from a size newborn to a size 12 months, that's pretty much going to be a year or less. So, and that baby wasn't wearing that for a year. So think about this. When you get stuff secondhand, it's still fairly new. And although you may be like, I want only new stuff, if you have a lot of stuff already and then just register for the things that you need, right? Not necessarily, you could register for some stuff that you want, but that's going to save money out of your budget. Because if you're like, okay, we're budgeting this much money, and you know that you got to paint the baby's room, we have to also baby proof the baby's room. Do we need to do any electrical work in our house? Like, is our house structurally sound? Is it totally safe? So we have to really think about this. Now, once we know that that's all taken care of, then you could try to figure out, okay, how much money will we need for these babies? I want this stroller, that's $1,200. I want these cribs that are $900 each. I could try to talk you out of them because you're only going to be using that crib for X amount of time. I would say put money in a bank account or have Dan figure out how to best invest it for you. But a crib isn't something that you should be spending $800 on. And for those of you that are out there that are saying, Nat, you're insane, trust me when I tell you. And this is not, by the way, my New York families or my coastal families. This is literally, there's people that don't have the budgets that are registering for things or want things that are way, 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 way above their head in hopes that somebody would buy them for them. Let's just say hypothetically somebody does. What are we going to do? What are we going to do with a $900 crib, just out of curiosity? After it's done, after the babies are out of the crib. Dan, what do you do with a $900 crib after the babies are out of the crib?
Facebook?
Did you guys do that? Did you and Nikki literally go crazy and buy, like, we're going to have the best of everything for all babies? Or were you like, no, let's be practical? So as a finance bro, right, did you go like full, like, we're going to have everything for them, we're getting the baby's first pony, right? Or were you like, let's be realistic, let's think about how much we're going to spend? What did you personally do when you found out that you were expecting for the first time?
I mean, we didn't have room in our apartment for stuff. So we were as little as possible was always my motto. But I think things are a little, I mean, again, I'm a little older, but things are a little bit different now because I feel like it's never been easier to use these online platforms to buy and sell used things. I mean, my coworker was just telling me about this website, Buy Nothing. Do you know about that one? Buy Nothing. Like, I feel like a lot of this is like made for young parents where it's just all this stuff. Your kids get older. You don't need it, from cribs and car seats to like clothes. I mean, it's great. Like I had to buy a suit for my son, and I think he outgrew it. Like by the time we got it home, like, it's like, you know, it's
that's
like,
us in shoes.
Why am I buying a new suit? Why would I just not get someone else had that fits him?
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a lot of resources now that, you know, didn't really exist back when my kids were little.
Well, it's unbelievable. Taylor just said we made the registry after figuring out what hand-me-downs we could get, mostly clothes, some bottles. The registry was made before my shower a couple months ago when we lucked out. Taylor, you are winning. That is exactly what you should do. Whereas, Whitney, I'm not criticizing you and you know I love you, we did not register for clothes, but we still received 15 newborn onesies at the baby shower. Everything we don't get, we'll look for secondhand. I challenge you, do it the other way. Do it the other way so that you get the secondhand stuff that you want and you're not looking for secondhand stuff out of desperation, especially when it comes to twin strollers, right? So like I'm telling you right now, by the way, you're not going to have just one stroller. I really don't care what anybody says. You're going to have more than one stroller. You're probably going to have 2 single strollers and you're probably going to have 1 double stroller, if only 1. Usually people start out with like a double snap and go and then kind of graduate to kind of their forever stroller. But if you could find all those big ticket items online secondhand, then you can register for all the little new stuff, and you can register for the cute little, you know, wall tapestries, and you can register for that $900 crib if you know that you have kind of the basics already taken care of. So yeah, baby registries are definitely your friend. I would flip it. I would get the secondhand stuff first, and then I would register, because then you're a little bit more in control and you're not under the gun to try to get stuff in your house before the babies get here. And ideally, everybody should have everything that they need for their twinnies by week 30. Okay, that is, now I'm not saying you're going to go into labor early, but I am saying that you are not going to want to do much after 30 weeks, you're freaking tired. Your belly is ginormous. You're just going to pray that there was some kind of like mechanical AI device that could stand behind you, just holding your belly up with somebody's hands. I mean, it gets heavy. So by week 30, ideally, your shower should be done. The baby's rooms should be done. Any equipment that you need should be assembled and installed. Your car seat should be inspected, and you should be ready to go at week 30 so that you could just relax and enjoy and finish up the loose ends that you can from your couch. You don't have to do anything after that. Okay, so that's my whole thing on baby registries. Dan, we're going to go to the next one, and this is all you, homeboy. So this is where kind of the rubber met the road when it came to me and Dan. So I will tell you the God's honest truth, right? And you guys know at Twiniversity that I'm all about TMI. I don't believe I have no boundaries. Yes, I've been working on it in therapy for years. I actually choose not to have them. I find that boundaries are just a burden to myself. And so really the truth behind the motivation, which honestly, Dan didn't even know about this until a couple months ago. But the motivation behind us getting protected is that my husband lost his dad when he was 11 years old. And so my husband's dad went fishing one afternoon with his uncle and his cousin. And unfortunately, they never came back. They went fishing off of Sheepshead Bay. It's something that they typically did. It wasn't a big deal, but the boat unfortunately had a faulty motor and it sank, and it was winter, and just bad things happened. Now, interestingly, his father and his uncle had passed away in the accident, but his cousin had lived. There was only one life jacket on the boat. And so when everything was said and done, of course, the family absolutely torn into pieces. I mean, I am sure that you guys could imagine, first of all, you're 11 years old, you lose your dad. It's kind of like the primal years. Like it's critical. However, his uncle had life insurance and had all the proper protections that he needed to have for his family. And my husband's dad had literally nothing. He did odd jobs to make money. He was a carpenter. Like, he was not somebody who was thinking about the future much. He was just trying to get through the day. And so my husband grew up basically watching kind of this tale of two cities. There was his family celebrating Christmas, and there was his cousins celebrating Christmas. And so my mother-in-law, which as much as crap as I talk about my mother-in-law, I really do love her. And Dan, weirdly enough, actually works with my in-laws too, because he works with my entire family. But she had to work, 3 different jobs, and she had to drive taxis overnight while the kids were sleeping. Like, she would just leave them to have another job just to make ends meet. And so their Christmases certainly were not extravagant by any means. Their birthdays, nothing was, and I'm not saying that holidays should be, but if she had to work, 14, 15 hours a day at minimum, it was a very different lifestyle. And so the cousins had like everything. She ended up buying a new house with the life insurance money. Like, they were very, very protected, and my husband wasn't. And so he definitely had a little bit of jealousy, right? And so when he became an adult, he was like, these are the things that I could do. And so I know that we had life insurance through our jobs. Both of us had life insurance through our jobs. However, the reason that what I did not know is that when you leave that job, your life insurance does not go with you. And this is where enter Dan Pagan.
Yeah. I know that you told me that story recently. It took you like 10 years before you told me that.
Honestly,
story.
Dan, I never even thought you didn't know it. Like, it's such a big story to us that it never, but then I don't even know why you didn't ask, because you work with my father-in-law and you clearly know that there's no genetic resemblance whatsoever, right? So it's just one of those things, and it still is a big deal to my husband now. And so, but we didn't know that whole thing about the work life insurance. Like, when I worked before Twiniversity, guys, I had like a real like office job. And so I know with that, I had everything that I needed with that job. I didn't know that when I left that job, you have to start over. And so, so Dan, could you talk about a little bit about protecting your future today? And not just with life insurance, but I do mean like in general.
Yeah. It's real. Those stories are real. And there's another story, unfortunately, we tell of, I think my second year working with you, we had a Twiniversity student who was diagnosed with brain cancer. expecting twins and passed away 2 years after that. And I think that was a big wake up call for us that this is real. And unfortunately, I've been doing this for 18 years. It is coming. These things are happening more than they ever have before. So these things are real and they can happen. And, look, I know this is a conversation about budgeting and saving. And the last thing you want to hear is you need to spend money on insurance. But I'm going to tell you, you need to spend money on insurance.
Absolutely.
Protection is paramount. And it's really something that has to be with you for your whole life. And that may mean you're having twins and it's time to get insurance and there's new costs. But the reality is these costs are going to be there throughout your life because they're vital. Things can go wrong. We can talk about investing and growing your money and saving. We can talk about paying debt. If something goes wrong, if you are hit by a car and now you can no longer work, or you're hit by a car and you pass away, your husband passes away, your wife passes away, or what if you're driving the car and you hit somebody and now you're sued? All of the planning we've done is out the window. So protection has to come first in building a plan. It doesn't matter your situation. You have 1 kid, 3 kids. Protection is paramount. And, there's 4 main categories that I won't get into too much detail, but number 1, your property and casualty insurance. That's your auto insurance. That's your homeowners or renters insurance. These are making sure you have proper liability limits. These are situations where you could be sued, a car accident. Maybe you have a nanny. The nanny hurts herself when she's watching the kids. A lot of things can go wrong where people can go after your income. They can go after your assets and your income. So you have to be protected. Disability insurance, long-term disability insurance in particular, your greatest asset is quite just simply your ability to work and make an income. Things go wrong. You get injured. You can get sick. You can be diagnosed with something. You want to really understand what is that benefit? What's coming in? What's replacing my paycheck? And now what is this insurance policy bringing my family every month? Legal documents, a will. You have children, you should have a will. Will can be very specific. Estate planning can be very specific to everyone's situation, but you should have something. Without a will, if mom and dad pass away or whatever it is a mess. You're going through probate court. There's a lot of decisions. It is not fair to your children to put them through that. You need to have your legal documents done. And then lastly, probably the most important is life insurance. It's the most important because it's the most catastrophic.
Yeah.
There's no coming back from it. So really, really important to have conversations to understand what's the right amount, to have conversations around types. Look, I work with my clients and there are investment strategies we'll talk about. There's cash flow strategies that we'll talk about. I will make up the cost that is going towards that protection down the line, but we can't skimp on it in the get-go. You have to protect your future with today. It has to come first, and we will make up for any of the costs that are going to that protection over time.
Now, we did have one question that said they would love specific recommendations. And so what I will tell you is that honestly, it varies throughout the country, which is why you really need to work with somebody one-on-one, right? Because what's available in New York may not be available in California. This is something, of course, that we learned through Dan too, that yes, there are companies that are universally global. However, there's chances that you could get a better rate, or you may have a more favorable cost by going with somebody else. And this is where it benefits you to work with somebody specifically, right? Because honestly, if it was just up to John and I, like had we never met you, I would have probably just been like AAA life insurance or something ridiculous that came in the mail. Not saying that that's bad, but it really would not have been good enough for us, right? So because when we sat down with Dan, we really said, okay, not like what is Nat worth, right? But like at the time that we sat down with Dan the first time, my income was just like peanuts in comparison to John. So I would think that like all the life insurance should go to John. And so like, since I didn't have an income, I had nothing to replace. And Dan was like, but wait a second. You do the laundry, you make dinners, you take care of the children, like you take care of the house. Like you are worth something on paper, because if you didn't do that, somebody else would have to, right? So if I wasn't home to take care of the children, God forbid, knock on wood, that something happened to me, the kids would have had to go into daycare. And John would still have the same salary, but I never thought that like my income needed to be like replaced. I really didn't. I'm not saying that I never really realized kind of what the value was of a stay-at-home mom, but I'm not saying we're a little bit more priceless than other people, but we do a hell of a lot. Like if you actually put down, if you're just a stay-at-home mom, right? If you put down everything that you do during the day and the jobs and the different people that it would take to make those up, you're looking at a big paycheck that we do not get. We get paid in kisses and hugs, blah, 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 all that garbage. But at the end of the day, I still needed the same protection despite the fact that my income was nothing. And I would have never thought about this without Dan. In all sincerity, I also didn't know that there was whole life insurance versus term life insurance. I didn't know that I could spend a little bit now. There's a lot of it now. Like you seriously, you know that. You changed my universe. And because it's something that was never discussed in my own home. Like my parents, honestly, my dad passed away, did not have life insurance. He had like a little bit of an investment account, but he did not have life insurance. My mom does not have life insurance. My aunt, my uncles, nobody has life insurance. And so I'm just thinking, if they didn't save, now this is going to sound really horrible, all those funeral expenses are on me. Like all those expenses, everything is on me. And so we weren't that type of family. And it's funny because I always thought there was kind of like an us versus them, right? There was like us that we eat like chicken thighs. Like we don't get chicken breasts as much as other people. And I did not realize that it does not matter how much you make, where you live, what you do, who you are. We all have to protect our families. And I'm not saying that you're negligent if you don't protect your family, but I'm saying at least get enlightened so that you don't have the situation with my husband and his cousin. And this is really the truth. And this is one of the main reasons why we worked with Dan from the beginning, because I don't think that people really discuss this. And so if you show of pause right now or throw in the chat, how many of you even thought about getting life insurance other than through work? Right? And then that's the first question. And then the second question I have for you, how many of you thought that if you have life insurance through work, that was just yours forever? Because Dan, it's like we got thumbs ups here. So the thing is everybody, we have these kind of misconceptions about things because if our families didn't do it, that means that we're just not going to do it. But that doesn't mean that we don't deserve it and that our kids don't. And I don't even give a crap about me, right? At the end of the day, as horrible as this sounds, I'm going to be dead, so it's not going to matter much. But I don't want the kids, or I don't want that to affect their college. And they're already going to be dealing with the loss of a family member. And then to have the financial burden on top of it is just a lot. But yeah, and so the thing is as soon as my kids turned 18, what did I do, Dan? That's it. I got the kids policies because now I know that life insurance is another avenue for savings, which that's something that you could talk to Dan about. I was not aware of that when I even found out about this. I thought that this was just a mind-blowing thing, but it is protection for your future. And that's just one thing. Dan, could you talk about the liability insurance? And could you talk about if you have a nanny or anything like that? And then we had another question about wills and stuff. So I want to get to that too. But could you talk about and these are another things, and why I say that Dan and I are trauma bonded. It's because we have dealt with hundreds, maybe even over 1,000 by now, if we really think about it, but hundreds of Twiniversity families that have seen some insane things. And so if your nanny was making mac and cheese for the twinnies and she pours water on herself, God forbid, and now she has a burn and she can't work, and she's like, I can't work forever because I have this tiny little burn on my hand. Let's not even go there and discuss that for a second, because this is a real thing that happened. But how could I protect my family so that if she did choose to sue us, God forbid, how do I know that our family is protected? And do you really need that? Is liability insurance an actual thing you need? Do I get it with my homeowner's policy? Do I get an additional policy? But if we're going to have a nanny, if we're going to have any type, a housekeeper, somebody comes to walk the dog, what type of coverage do I need, not want? What do I need to make sure that my family and I are protected today?
Yeah, I mean, I almost always recommend something called an umbrella policy, which is it's just a standalone liability policy. They're sold in $1 million blocks. $1 million. It's not crazy expensive. It's maybe like $20 a month or something like that to have $1 million of umbrella. But it's a situation where you're found liable for something. You mess up,
Mm-hmm.
and now you're sued. And again, I've seen many people's car insurance where if you look at kind of that line item that talks about bodily injury or liability, you'll see your Geico policy or your auto policy will cover you for something like $50,000 or $100,000. And you could clearly you injure somebody who can't work anymore, you could be sued for millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So we want to transfer that risk to the insurance company. We don't want them coming after your assets. We don't want them coming after your future income. We want them going after the insurance company's assets. So that's what an umbrella policy does. That entails having the right liability limits. That entails having an umbrella policy that's in sync with it. To even go a little bit further, I recommend working with somebody in that area, somebody where all they do is property and casualty insurance, a
Yeah.
broker, have a relationship with them. We don't know what's in these policies. Things go wrong. We have
Yeah.
claims. You're calling a 1-800 number and talking to somebody different. Like, you need an advisor, an advocate who can tell you what you have. Comes in very handy. Even like I was at least another car. Like, I was on the phone with this guy on a Saturday helping me like with my insurance. So really helpful to work with somebody.
It's you guys are unbelievable. So now you specifically don't do that. You have like a team of your X-Men, and somebody does insurance and somebody does financial savings and then somebody does wills, right? So let's talk about that for a second. Is that something that we should get done now while we're expecting, or like when ideally should somebody have a will, and why can't I just write a piece of paper or photocopy a page out of a Staples workbook like my Aunt Frances's friends did, right? But like, why can't you just write something on a legal notepad and put it in a safe and call that a will?
Well, you can. I don't know that you want to rely on that. And maybe it'll be honored, maybe it won't. But in a will, there's some decisions beyond just, hey, if I die, I want the kids to go to my sister. There's much more entailed in it. A will, look, a will isn't really for you. It's for your children.
Mm-hmm.
This is a situation commonly where both parents are gone. And now there's decisions around who's going to be raising them, who's in charge of the finances for them, any money that's left from them, how is that going to be invested, who's in charge of that, when should they receive that money, do they get it all when they're 18? A child who lost both parents when they're young, getting a check like that at 18 is not ideal. So there's a lot of decisions that need to go in, just an awful event like that. And again, everyone's situation is a little bit different. There's a lot of inexpensive ways to do this. LegalZoom, sometimes your company will have it. Optimally, when I talk to my clients, it's working with an estate attorney. Work with an
Mm-hmm.
estate attorney in your state. You want to build a relationship. You want somebody specific to your situation, making sure it's in line with your documents. I think the other reason is, part of the reason we're having this will is, God forbid anything happens. God forbid something happens, you need an estate attorney.
Yeah.
You have built that relationship, somebody who knows it. So, yeah, that's
And it's also,
the
it's not
will.
just a will, right? So like when we discussed it, and guys, you're going to find that this is a lot of personal stuff because it's literally things that I've done with Dan. But I remember going to the estate attorney, which I'm like, what the hell am I doing here, right? Why am I an estate attorney? But why Dan said that before, by the way, is it's for your children, is because if something happened to you, God forbid, it would go to the living spouse, and then after that is when the will might come into play. But of course, that could be something you write in your will, that it doesn't go to your spouse. So there are definitely, rules and regulations, but it's not just an estate attorney that deals with wills. It's also that healthcare proxy, and it's that power of attorney. And that is, oof, I can't even tell you. Now, guys that you're watching, while you're thinking about you, I will tell you, what are they calling us? The sandwich generation? That we not only have to take care of our littles, but we have to take care of our bigs, also known as our parents. So we are kind of smack in the middle of this where I am taking care of my mama bear and I am taking care of my aunts and my uncles, and let's not go there. But it's very interesting that when we were working with an estate attorney when both my parents were alive, that he said, like, Eddie, that's my dad. He was like, what do you want to happen? Or who do you want to have power of attorney? Or who do you want to have the healthcare proxy? And he did not want my mom to do it because this is really morbid and horrible, but my mom would never trip over a plug in a hospital, even if there was no sign of anything that's just against her religious and moral beliefs. She would never do it. However, it's what my dad wanted. And he knew that I would respect his wishes versus my mother would respect her wishes because that's the love of her life. And I don't blame her. It would be hard for me to do that too. So I thought it was really interesting when we were going through all of that, that we did cover power of attorney and all that, and having somebody to go to that's not on LegalZoom. Like when I needed the power of attorney, when my dad was literally in the hospital and we had to have these decisions to be made, I just literally made a phone call and I had it in my inbox in no time. And that was the benefit of having that done. I would have never found it. And I couldn't even think. You can't think about these things. And so to be able to have a point person to go to, and that is just absolutely extraordinary. And so this, as much as this is for us, I would say that you may want to have a discussion about your parents with your parents as well, about making sure that they have the proper protections and paperwork and everything involved, because it should not be up to you to make decisions for them that you do not know what those decisions that they want, right? So it's just something like I'm getting all choked up because it was very difficult, but by me doing this process for my husband and my twinnies, it opened the Pandora's box of like, crap, my parents have nothing. And so when we were doing everything for me and John and the twinnies, we also did everything for my parents and my aunts and all that. And I'm very sorry that you're freezing to death in your office. It's a horrible problem to have, Dan. Are you super cold there? Okay, so now we had another question. Can you get a will and life insurance and everything during pregnancy?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So
the answer is
I
yes.
think a lot of
And
people
I
think
almost,
no.
yeah, sometimes I encourage it. Like, listen, when those twins come, you're in survival mode. You're just trying to keep your head above water. I recommend getting your ducks in a row before the babies come, or at least getting the process started. Get some momentum there. So you can, when you get a will, you're not naming your children. It'll literally say your children. So you have more children. You have to change your will. Life insurance, you can get life insurance as a single person. You can get life insurance when you're in your 70s. You can get life insurance when you're 1 year old, as Nat knows. So there's no limitations on when you can get it.
I'm going to say to you guys right now, we're coming to an end. We still have 2 more points to get to. But if you have any questions for Dan, this is the time to throw them in the chat. Okay, so you guys do that. That's your homework. Dan, our next topic is savings isn't just for a rainy day, right? So when we're talking about savings, we always think about, that what's going to happen, right? So we saw this during COVID for us, me and you. Like we were like, oh my God, thank God we had that in the bank because John works at a restaurant. He had literally no income, nor did the world. So yes, there are going to be catastrophic worldwide events that we may not be able to protect against, but there are some other things. And the rainy day, it doesn't have to be something bad that happens. Savings could also be for a good thing that you're like, I'm missing too much with the kids. I want to stay home with them. So when you're talking about savings, I know that obviously we should start now, right? But in general, how do we start that ritual, that kind of habit of saving? So you already talked about, that technically you guys could be kind of like the trustees of everything, and then you give us a budget and you kind of invest the rest. So that's one option that we have. But then if we were like, no, we're not giving you control over our 75, million Turkish dollars. I don't know what that actually translates to in American dollars. But what could we do today to start having a better routine, ritual, practice? How do we get into the practice of saving?
Yeah, I mean, I think the more discipline you can create around this, the better. And one of the things I said in the beginning was open up an account, where you don't have an ATM card for it, you don't have a checkbook, and just automatically have that come out of your account or direct from your paycheck,
Mm-hmm.
and just start with something, right? Just pick an amount, start saving that amount, pretend the account isn't even there, and before you know it, it really starts to grow. Um, One of the questions that I get asked a lot around is investing, and investments are a big part of the conversations that we have, as you know, Nat. But I go in an order, which philosophically I believe is the correct order to go about your finances, which is protection first, which is what we just talked about. Number two is save, and number three is invest. And the reason why save comes before invest is because there's no real secret to financial planning. It really just boils down to your savings rate. The amount you save will always trump where you save it.
Mm-hmm.
So your rate of savings beats your rate of return. And what I mean by that is if we can figure out ways that would get you to save more money, you'll have more than if I found an extra rate of return here and there for you. It's going to give you more options, more liquidity, and it also may reduce your risk, because what happens with a lot of people is you realize you haven't saved enough and you got to catch up. And what do? Let's get more aggressive. The market's doing really well. I want to get those returns that everyone are getting. And what have you now done? You've incurred a lot of risk and you have potential for losing a lot more,
Mm-hmm.
which can happen. So discipline around the right savings amount solves a lot of problems in the long run. Start growing, start getting that compounding. I think the other thing is balance, right? I think a lot of people think, well, I'm saving into my 401k. I have nothing against 401ks except understand they're not liquid.
Yeah.
If you tap into your 401k, you're paying taxes, assuming it's a traditional 401k, and you're paying a penalty. And I've had many clients that have been in situations where they've had to do this. They've had to borrow against it, couldn't pay back. Really learning the consequences that it's the first place we save when we're young and you start building it up, but it's not a viable place to use. You can't really touch it until you're 59 and a half. So it's about saving, and saving in a liquid way, right? Financial balance. Like, yes, we want to grow and invest, but there's a lot of things that are going to happen before retirement, right? Like college, buying that house, other things are going to go on. And not to mention, it's not just for the emergency, but it's opportunities that may come
Mm-hmm.
your way. You may get an opportunity to invest in something, maybe your friend's starting the next Google or something, and you want to be able to take advantage of that. Having your money tied up in things is in the context of balance.
Mm-hmm.
Those are things to look at. Again, I mean, a lot of this is working with somebody to understand the priorities and the options that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if you can just start with that discipline around saving and saving in liquid places, you're on a very good track.
All right, we're going to our last point because it's going to cover a lot of the questions that we have here. So if I see, guys, if you look in the chat too, daycare, 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 daycare. How do we pay for daycare, right? We have these two little humans that are going to show up. We already thought that we couldn't afford, Chinese food on a Thursday night. And now we both want to keep our jobs. How do we possibly afford to put these kids in daycare, which some of them are as expensive as my kids' college? So how do we do that? Or is it we're not looking in the right places? Are we not doing the math to see if daycare actually is a viable option? Like, what do we do if we have to do this? What are some of the options for childcare? And I know you and I discussed this ad nauseum because it is such a big topic here in New York City. But one of the first things that I always say to our mamas and papas is do the math and see if daycare is the cheapest option to go, because we both know that sometimes a nanny actually is cheaper than the cost of two daycares. So if we need to save, no matter if it's a nanny or if it's daycare, how the heck are we going to save all this money now if I'm going to need to shell this out in, 8 months?
Yep. It's by far the biggest expense for expectant parent, for twins. Anyone, even if you have a singleton. And yeah, we have found that, like, putting two children into daycare, oftentimes it's actually cheaper to get a nanny, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is something we found. Um, it's tough. This really depends on where you live. It depends on your family situation. There's a lot of depends of how to solve this, but the reality is this just might be one of those sunk costs that are a factor of having twins and where you live. And it means, sort of the importance of saving before you have twins and making sure you've prepared for it. It's weathering the storm till maybe daycare is over and some of these expenses go away. But it's really just having a good look at your budget and assessing all the options and finding what's most cost efficient.
Yeah. But Dan, everybody could do this with you, right? So like everybody that's on with us now, like Dan's going to email you and you could literally, like Dan could be your guy too. So like we're not hiding him behind a wall. Like that's the whole point, is that we want you to have the same access to somebody who's really going to hold your hand and guide you through these really, really difficult processes, right? Because, and it kind of goes back to the daycare, like going back to that $1,500 stroller. Do we spend that money or do we just get the $400 stroller and invest those extra bucks and hopefully maybe see a few dollars come out of it? Like there are ways to get this done, but this is why you need a professional, right? Like when you guys are, you're expecting twins, obviously, you came to the right place. When I have a question about finances, he's who I go to. And so everybody, there's got to be like a chain of command. We can't know everything about everything. And even if you have like, your brother who dabbles in the stock market, that may not work for you. What works for your brother may not work for you, because I could tell you, if I had a nickel for every friend that was like, why do you need somebody? I could help you with that. I'm like, yeah, okay, you could help me with that. Anybody could help me with that. I could also just Google all this information. But I know that the proof is in the pudding, because my kids are in college, because they did really well in life, but we're paying for it literally without blinking because of Dan. Like there was, when they went to college, we're like, okay, here's the budget. Like we gave our kids a budget of what their tuition could be. We weren't like, yeah, let's go to Harvard, let's go whatever. But we knew what they could spend. And then interestingly, because they're twins, they had a discussion amongst themselves. And so my son was like, okay, well, if I get this scholarship, then you could go to this school. Like it was really fascinating that we even involved our kids who you're like, they're 17. Why are you even bothering with this? But the thing is everybody needs to become financially responsible at some point. And I don't want the kids to be me. I don't want the kids to, be 31 years old with kids and not have a nickel in savings. I don't want that. I want my kids to be involved in this process the whole step of the way, so that I am raising a generation of savers. I am raising a generation of financially aware people, so that they are not doing silly things with money that they shouldn't. Although honestly, Dan, I do feel like we have to have an intervention with my daughter, but that's a whole conversation.
Another podcast.
Like, that's it. She definitely needs to come in and see that, we don't need that much sushi, Dan. If I looked at her credit card bills, nobody needs that. But another question that just came up, because I know we're running.
Nat, can I just say one thing?
Sure.
I think like we've had a lot of conversations today about budget and discipline around savings. I think a lot of these conversations are similar to like a diet, right? I think like, we've heard of like great diets, and maybe we go on that diet and we're on it and we're losing weight and it's all good. But like what happens after like 4 months, 5 months, 6 months is we tend to go back to our old habits. And I think the same is true with our finances and our cash flow. So a big part of this is work with somebody. One of the real benefits of working with somebody is just accountability, and awareness around this. So if it's not me, find somebody who can help you with this, who you check in with. It's going to create your consciousness. You got to spend money. I'm afraid what my financial advisor is going to say. Like, I like hearing that. Like, I like that they're thinking about me when they have to spend money. Sometimes that's a good thing. So yeah, important to have a coach in your corner.
Yeah, you're the best. Now, we do have other questions, but unfortunately, I know that you have to get back to work, and I appreciate that. And I know everybody else has to get back to work too. Because all my expecting people are either on bed rest in a hospital, God forbid, waiting for these babies, or sitting in a car, maybe watching this. But I do want to know that there's more things that we didn't cover, like 529s. And all I'm going to say is, I'm shocked your eyebrows didn't go up, Dan, when I just said that, because that topic comes up all the time. But just call Dan. We do not do 529s in the Diaz house, thanks to one Mr. Dan Pakin. And I am very, very, very thankful that we did not, after seeing exactly what happened to my children. But the rules of 529 have changed in the past 20 years, I don't know, 20 different times. So knowing that that's something that you really should talk one-on-one with Dan about, that is kind of where I'm going to leave you. Now, Dan, close it out for us. What do we do? How do we find you? I put your phone number back up on there. So they got your cell number, your direct number, and your email. If they need help, like, do they come to you with specific questions? Should they email you one-off? Or is it like, can they email you one-off? Like, what if they don't know that they like need like the whole kit and caboodle, so to speak? Like, what if they do just have some questions? Is it okay if our people just give you a buzz?
Yeah, absolutely. My commitment is to be this resource for Twiniversity, and I always will be. So you can feel free to reach out to me with any questions. I think we have the emails of everyone that registered. So me or my team will be reaching out to see if you'd like to have a conversation, to set up a time to talk a little bit more, to tell us about your situation and give you some guidance there. I don't charge any planning fee. There's no cost to any of this. But if you do get that email, it's always nice if you just respond to it. Let us know, yes, you're interested. No, you're not interested. Helpful for us to just cross you off the list either way. But that's it. And then, happy to talk to anyone.
And Dan, you have a podcast too that we could listen to on the drive home, right?
Yes. If you need to you might fall asleep when you're driving, but it's,
That's not nice. That's not nice.
No, it's riveting. It's a riveting, but no, it is. It's good. I think we've done like 15 of them now, and they're great. They're really good. They're different topics. So we'll cover ones that are just about life insurance. Ones are about, you were a guest on our podcast. You could check out Nat.
That could be their intro episode.
That's our most listened to one, I think, right now.
Well, hello. Come on now. That's it. And this, I think, is going to be the most watched because people they're going to watch it with one eye because they don't want to know. They don't want to think about this. But you guys, we have no choice. We have to become an adult at some point. And if this isn't, if your 20s aren't the reason why, I don't even know what it is. But this is not something that is for the super rich generational wealth. It's got to start someplace. Dan, by the way, you didn't tell them the name of the podcast, and Brendan Penn is very upset about it.
Oh, right. The Tempest podcast. Tempest,
there you go.
Tempus. Check it out at your local podcast store.
He's a good financial advisor. He's a very bad marketer. So I will tell you guys that. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. Dan will message you. And if you guys need anything else from me or the Twiniversity team, to email us 24 hours a day to just community@twiniversity.com, or you could slide into our DMs anywhere. We're just literally at Twiniversity on every platform. And I'm very proud of you that you guys stuck this out the whole time. And I know these twinnies are going to be great, but this is just the beginning. It's going to get better and it's going to get easier, but we really do need to make better habits for ourselves now. Right, Dan?
Yes. And I'll tell you, it's awesome. Children are amazing. My kids are older. They're 15 and 12 now. It goes quick, but it's the best thing I ever did. These twins, I love talking to these parents of twins. I know some of them now where their kids are 14 and 15 and knowing they're twins the whole time. It's amazing. I always say it's the greatest science experiment you'll ever do. Nature versus nurture right there in your house.
True.
But it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And congratulations to everybody.
All right, Dan, say goodbye to everybody.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you later.